Join me on a fascinating journey where I show you some of the techniques used in scale aeromodelling. Hello again, modellers. Back in the workshop. I'm waiting for some materials to arrive, so there's not really a lot I can do relating to the last few videos. So I'm just going to have a play around with something that I've been musing over. This is the fuselage from the Blackburn, and this area I've put a floor in there, and it's just a piece of 16th balsa. But all of this area in here, I'm not sure what the wood is, and please put in the comments if you know what the wood is, but the colour looks like a rich mahogany. Now I doubt the aircraft is made from mahogany, maybe it is, but I would have thought it would have been a lighter wood like spruce, but back then maybe it wasn't. So anyway, if you do know, let me know and I can pass it on to everybody else. But what I'm going to try is using a rich mahogany wood stain on this balsa, just to see how it works. Now I appreciate the areas where there's glue, it probably won't work, but there is sections of aluminium that go over the top of this, so that'll probably hide some of it. And I just don't want it to look like the very light coloured balsa that it's made of. So I'm going to do the framework and all of this top bit and the floor and probably this panel here, although the instrument panel will go in front of it, just to see how it looks. So the stuff I'm going to try, this is made by Morels or Morels, and it's a dark rich mahogany, and I'm going to put some of that on with a brush, and we'll just in fact I might put it on with a cotton bud. That sounds like probably a better way of doing it. Well, I'll put some on, let it dry, see what it does. You never know. There's possibly people out there that have already done this and are screaming at the microphone, no, don't do it. So if that's one of you guys, then I'm going to try it anyway, we'll see. I think I'll probably do this straight from the bottle. It's a very narrow bottle, I'm very nervous about tipping that over, but anyway, there we go, we'll see. I'll do the stringers at the bottom first, just to see how it looks. In fact, I'll do the floor. Well, I think the cotton bud was a good call. It seemed quite good at doing this, although it doesn't want to get right down in all the areas. It doesn't want to get right down into the grain in some places. Oh, okay, you've got to put a bit more on. That's what it was. That's what it needed. Now the only trouble with the using the Q-tips, I can't get right down into the nooks and crannies, so I may have to use a brush to just finish it off. We'll keep going and see how we get on. Now, I don't know why I've just done that, because the instrument panel is on top of that, but just in case I actually put the instruments directly onto that, I may as well leave it. Now what I might have to do is these areas where there's glue and the stain won't actually work, I might have to, and there's an area there, look, that's a bit unsightly, I might have to try putting another coat on when it dries, just to see if that will cover it up even better. But it should be a fairly light solution, shouldn't be adding too much weight, I hope. We'll let that dry and see if it looks dreadful. What I'm going to look at next, while I'm waiting for the materials to arrive, is the way I'm going to make the tail surfaces, and it's going to be quite difficult. The issue is that the surfaces are made from tubing and then they're fabriced, but they're fabriced only on one side, and then strips of fabric are placed on the other side to cover the tubing, and what you end up with is a single layer of fabric between the frame, and the fabric forms a V, forms a channel from the tubing to a couple of inches in. And if you look at the photograph of the full size, you can just about make out the ridge from the tubing that goes down and then meets the single layer of fabric in the middle. It's been really puzzling me as to how I can reproduce this. Now, I had thought I was just going to apply tissue to one side and then make some sort of press that presses the tissue down, and then apply the fabric or apply the tissue to the other side, just the tapes, and that would hold it. But I don't think it will. And there's issues as well with gluing the tissue to the tissue or doping the tissue to the tissue without it sticking to whatever the structure is underneath. There's ways around that, but I'm still mulling how to do it over. So what I'm going to do is try something else first while I'm still cogitating and thinking. I'm going to use 2mm with a 1mm hole, so a tube, 2mm carbon tube, for these uprights. And they're going to allow me to slot 1mm tube inside to pin them into the fuselage. So that I think is fine. So what I've done is I've made the frame out of 16th balsa, and then I've cut a channel, well actually cut right through, to apply the carbon rod. And I'll do another one here, and then I'll do another one at the back here. The front I'm not going to worry about. And then I'll use some 2mm carbon or 1.5mm carbon rod all the way along and all the way around the rest of the frame. Then when I lift it off of here, I'm going to chamfer from the tube towards the centres, chamfer an edge. And then I'll just tissue one side and tissue the other side, and I won't have to worry about this angled section appearing right, because it's actually going to be sanded into the wood. Anyway, that's the plan. So let me carry on building and you can watch. Now I'm lifting it off the board because actually that balsa is actually on the lower edge, and I need to make it a little bit thinner so that I can get this piece in there. I'm still going to lift it, I think. Nice and rigid. It's not as light as I'd like, and I think this is the problem with using the carbon tube. I'm not going to cut it on there. I'm going to go and cut that on the board. So that's trimmed that down. Let's take that out. That should now leave us enough room to get this rod in. And glue that in place. So I'll pin it back down on the board to get that last one in place, and then we'll try and sand these chamfer bits. Now, as I say, this is only a test, just to see if this will work. As you can see, it's a great deal of effort. On a simpler model, simpler design, you would just make these out of balsa, and that would be the end of it. But this does require something a little bit more accurate. Okay, that's the framework of the fin. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that off, we'll sand around the edges and make it pretty, and then I'll try and chamfer these edges as best I can, and then we'll try and tissue it and just see how it goes, see how it looks, if it's too heavy. And there we have it. Let's go and find the scales and we'll see how heavy it is. 3.3 grams. That's a little bit on the heavy side. But we'll keep going because the whole model is a lot larger than anything I've built for indoors before. So it still might be okay. But it is quite alarming because it is so far towards the back of the aircraft. But it doesn't really need to be chamfered to exactly the middle, but as long as it's chamfered to a really thin edge on the inside, I think we should be fine. Just going to use a flat permagret needle file for this. You can see what I'm doing. The black is actually highlighting, the carbon soot is highlighting where I've sanded. And you see the effect I'm trying to get. I hope. I can imagine what you're all thinking now. What a rigmarole. And you're probably right. Right, I'll carry on doing this and then we'll come back to this once I've sanded it all. I've chamfered all the edges on the inside, so they're absolutely paper thin right on the inside edges. So what I'm going to do now is go and have a rummage in my tissue box, see what tissue I've got, and then I'll tissue. Well, actually, first of all, I think I'm going to give this a coat of dope to seal it, and then I'll sand it again just to make sure it's sealed, and then I'll go and get the tissue, and we'll look at putting some tissue on this and see what we can do with it. I thought I'd do the test part, and here it is with 2 or 3 coats of dope on it. And it's not bad. I think it's got a nice feel about it. The carbon rods have made it very nice and stiff, so it has not warped one jot. It's absolutely true. And the effect of the balsa around the edges has meant that the tissue, appears to be one piece. And in fact, what I actually did was I put tissue on both sides, and then when the tissue was, once the tissue had water shrunk dried, I then applied dope around the edges, and I used my fingers to squeeze the tissue together as it dried. So it is now one piece of tissue, but it's actually made of 2 layers. And it does give this effect that I was trying to achieve, which is, I'm pleased with that. And it's nice and rigid. It weighs 3 grams, which is a little bit too much. But it's a bigger model than I'm used to building, so 3 grams might not be that bad. We'll have to see. I think I'll keep going with this method. It's certainly a lot easier to make because of the balsa edging. What I might do is actually make the edges this thickness rather than this great big thickness. What I've been doing is following the 3-view sizes, and really when you look at the photograph, it's more like this size all the way around. So I think the 3-view is a little bit out when it comes to the size of the strips of fabric around the edge. So, but otherwise, I'm really pleased with that little bit of a test. Going back to the fuselage that I showed you earlier, it's now dry, and the colour of the stain I'm very disappointed with. And this is a prime example of me being a bit stupid, really. And hopefully you're a little bit more sensible than me. You were probably shouting out, "Test it first." Well, I didn't, and I should have. So I'm not really very happy with that colour. It should be a much redder colour than that, and the picture that they showed of what this colour should be was very red, and that's what I wanted. So I'm not overly pleased with it, but much of this gets covered with an aluminium shroud, so you won't see a lot in there, and there's a seat goes in here which is going to block off a lot of that. I'm not sure what to do about this area here where the glue has meant that the stain has not worked. I may have to touch this in with a brown paint, an enamel or something like that, and just gently fill it all in a little bit. I could even use something like a brown felt pen just to soften that edge. But anyway, there you go. It's just a little bit more work. I'll keep going with the tail surfaces because I can make those. I've got enough parts to carry on with that. In the back of the head, I'm trying to think of how I'm going to mount them. I think I'm going to bury little tiny tubes, little short sections of tube in the fuselage for the tailplane and for the fin. And if you look at the fin as I made it, there are little stubs that will fit into tubes that are on the fuselage. So I'm thinking ahead as I go, which is which you have to do if you haven't got a plan. All right. Anyway, hope you enjoyed the video. If you have, click like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.